Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen nabiyyina Muhammadi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in amma ba'du. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakum khair. Slowly but surely. Important topic today on our identity. There's two aspects in which there is, you would say, it doesn't cause a stir, it doesn't cause a problem. One is the aspect of our private faith. So when it comes to our private faith, our ritual acts, like for example praying salah, right, for example fasting, then it doesn't necessarily cause a stir, it doesn't necessarily cause any problems to anyone. Is it on? No, it's off. Okay, so now the mic's working, inshallah. Let's make a start again. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Identity, that's what I was talking about. Now there's certain aspects of our identity which don't necessarily cause a stir and are seen as acceptable, call it what you like. Those are our, what you would call our ritual acts of worship. Our praying salah, our fasting, and things of that nature. There's another aspect of our identity that we share those values and virtues with other. Is it okay? We are. It's the summer, isn't it? Everybody gets a little bit joshi, mashallah. We all good? All right. So, what was I saying? Identity. So there's certain things, certain values, which obviously we share with other people, whether it's people of other faiths or people of no faith. So, for example, honesty, decency, fairness, justice, and things of that nature. It's only when we get onto other matters which may come under more scrutiny and come under more questioning. And unfortunately, it's those matters which, as a community, we slowly seem to be sort of giving up on. So, for instance, let's talk about the food that we eat. Now, the food that we eat has to be slaughtered in a particular type of manner, in which the animal, according to the Sunnah, is not brought unconscious in any way. A knife is drawn across its neck and we consume it. According to some animal sort of activists, they will consider that to be harming the animal. They will consider that to be causing pain to the animal. So they will try to offer alternatives. So we find that the way we eat or what we eat comes under some level of scrutiny. Also, the manner in which we dress, that is also something which comes under scrutiny. The fact that as men, it is less so, but more so, for example, for the women. Whether they choose to cover their hair, whether they choose to cover their face, whether they choose to cover the rest of their body. That is another thing which now comes under some level of scrutiny. The marriage arrangements, the permissibility that's been granted to men compared to women, the issues of divorce, and other concerns of that nature, we find that there's a continuous, I won't use the word attack, but there's a continuous effort made to undermine this type of our identity. Now, what we have to understand, that when we accept Islam in its totality. We can't pick and choose those areas which suit and those areas which don't suit. By doing so, we become the deciding factor of what is halal and haram, and not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes, the fuqaha may explore certain areas in order to determine whether living in a certain context, those matters, whether they need to be adhered to or don't need to be adhered to. So some of you may recall when I was here a few years ago, when I did a long lecture on fiqh al-aqaliyat, Muslims living as a minority in non-Muslim contexts. What aspects of their identity should they retain, and what aspects of their practice are they permitted to not necessarily adhere to. But another area is what's now being broadly termed as sexuality, where Islam recognizes gender, but it doesn't recognize the term sexuality. And there's a new term come out. So even when we fill out kind of forms which are done anonymously, the question may come up, sexuality, heterosexual, homosexual, whatever, and you tick one. And we naturally tick heterosexual. But in Islam, there's no definition of sexuality. There's a definition of gender. So in a way, we kind of inadvertently make a choice without realizing. So in all our aspects of our identity, there is clearly, obviously we live in a society and we live in a world in which these matters or religious impact on our day-to-day life is being eradicated or minimized. And as I've already mentioned, there's certain aspects that we share with the wider community. And as a result, we can come together with the wider community and share those practices. We've talked about justice, honor, things of that nature. But there are certain things in which we must remain as a separate entity. And that is what defines us as a Muslim. Because if we start to give those acts or those aspects away, then what remains to identify us as a Muslim are no longer there. And this is what's termed broadly as assimilation, tashabbuh, where a group of people remove all their identity until they are no longer to be able to be discerned from the greater population. So what we eat, how we dress, the beard we keep, all these are our identifiers. They set us apart from other communities. Why? Why should we be set apart from other communities? Why can't we just be like everybody else and just get along? You know, the Christians will come and keep a fast with us. The Jews may even come and keep a fast with us. Well, what's wrong with us going and then celebrating Easter with them? You know, give and take, live and let live. Let's, kind of mix in with all of this. Why are we always so stubborn and stuck in our ways? This was the very same point that was raised with the Prophet ﷺ, in which the mushrikun came to Rasulullah ﷺ in Makkah. And he said, look, let's reach some kind of agreement. Why can't we celebrate your God once and then celebrate our idols another time? Why can't we just reach some kind of arrangement? In those very difficult circumstances, we say we live in difficult circumstances. In those very difficult circumstances where the Prophet ﷺ was a persecuted minority, where his companions were killed and tortured, he did not accept it. He said, no, I can't. I can only worship one God. I cannot remove and accept that. So when it comes to certain things for us as Muslims, we must always retain our identity. Why? Because we bring a message and the other communities bring a message. We bring our conviction in Allah. We bring our shahada, our witnessing of Allah. When we say ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna, then we're making a witnessing of Allah, that we witness Allah. It's our conviction to Allah. So we need to share our message of Allah. And our message of Allah is very different than an atheist's understanding of authority, than a Jewish understanding of God, than a Christian's understanding of God. They're very different. And we can't like become what's called like a kichre, everything mixed together. We have to stand separate in our identity. Now, I'm not trying to promote militancy or separatism. What I am saying is that we are entitled to our own identity. We see what's going on currently in Birmingham, where particularly the LGBTI community are trying to enforce their perception of what's morally correct. Now, there's a lot of conflation going on, and there's a lot of, sort of confused tactics, smoke screens and mirrors. No Muslim has any issue about showing tolerance to people who decide to live their lives in a different way. By the acceptance of living in Britain, we accept that. Whether we make a testification of that, or whether we've accepted it subliminally, that's a matter of fact. That's part of your citizenship. That's part of the agreement that you have, that you respect or that you tolerate other ways of life. And you allow, if we can use that word, and them to practice in the way they practice. That's not what's going on in Birmingham in particular. What is going on is that the moral values to do with different sexuality is being pushed and promoted as good, as sound. Now, because we find ourselves in a complicated area and we think, surely by saying something, would we not be labeled homophobic? And then the kind of same flip argument is used on us and said, well, hold on, how would you like if somebody was Islamophobic? And we sort of think, yes, a good point is that. I wouldn't want anybody to be Islamophobic, so therefore I shouldn't be homophobic. And that's the kind of argument. What we need to do is re-term phrases. That homophobia should be termed as a hatred for a people or a intolerance of a people who choose to engage in that way. Muslims don't have hatred for people who adopt that way. We consider it to be a sin, and we must continue to consider it to be a sin. We consider zina to be a sin. Nobody was using a hammer against the Muslim community to say you must accept girlfriends and boyfriends. That happened a long time ago, where the Muslim community considered zina to be a sin. But we know cohabitation is legal in this country. There was no hammer brought to the Muslim community to say, nah, sorry mate, you have to accept zina as being a sound way of life. You must respect it. In fact, we're going to start teaching it in primary schools, that having a boyfriend and girlfriend is a good thing. That was never brought about. Never has. So why suddenly, when it's this type of thing that is being brought about? This is one of those things where the Muslim community's identity is slowly being erased away, bit by bit. And it's only a matter of time. Again, I will refer particularly to, say, the Muslim ladies' dress, because the Muslim male dress is somewhat more flexible. What used to be a garment which was all-concealing has now slowly become the hijab is just a headscarf. Now, the hijab is a concept. It is not a piece of clothing. It's a concept. Even men practice hijab. We were talking with the brothers yesterday about seeing a pretty woman or accidentally your gaze falling on an attractive woman. It's a case of lowering the eyes, looking away. That's also hijab of the eyes. So hijab is a concept and it applies to everybody, male or female. So when a woman used to consider the hijab to be not engaging with the opposite gender, not being flirting with the opposite gender, being quite clear and discreet and quite firm in her conversation so that there's no confusion that this lady might actually like me because she's sort of talking a little bit different when she's actually just talking as a matter of fact. And that slowly then became a piece of clothing, and then that piece of clothing eventually became a headscarf. So a sister might wear short sleeves, well, she'll have a headscarf and she'll say, well, I practice hijab. And things of that nature. And eventually that hijab has slowly not been something which covers the head and the neck and the front part, until it's just become like a turban on top of the head. So the question might come out, well, why doesn't she abandon it altogether? Many sisters have chose to abandon it altogether. It's a way of allowing a certain type of Islam, an acceptable form of Islam within British society. That's what that is. That we will tolerate that. We won't tolerate this. Well, being tolerant is a two-way street. Tolerance is not to colonialize the minds of the minority. We've already been colonialized back in the day when we were in the motherland. Now this is a reattempt to colonialize the minds of the Muslims. The religion which is acceptable to us is like this. Well, our religion is our religion. And we should be allowed to express our religion as we choose. Similarly, society was not too concerned, obviously I'm old enough to know, society is not too concerned when there was blatant racism going on in our streets, where Muslim men were attacked, where Muslim women were attacked, where you could not get a certain job, where all your practices, whatever, people were abused. We suddenly now talk about tolerance when we've had, the way the society is going now, and the Muslim minority community is becoming somewhat majority, especially places like London, Birmingham, Bradford, Dewsbury, Bury, and places like that, where now the Muslim community is becoming quite assertive and it's pushing its own identity. So now suddenly tolerance comes in. So we have to be aware of the wider influence that's taking place. But what we as individuals need to do is retain our identity. Our identity is what makes us Muslim. Without our identity, we lose our Islam. And Islam is something which we don't determine what it is. It's not according to my criteria or your criteria. Islam is according to the criteria which has already been set. Now again, I repeat, this does not mean that we have to take a separatist attitude or move away. We've seen, if we look across in China, how the Muslim identity has been seen as a problem, where in fact the Chinese Muslims, they are forcibly their religion is being taken from. And that's no different. Rohingya, look around across the whole of the world, Gaza, Philistine, everywhere you will see the Muslim identity is seen as problematic. Some have taken a very assertive, aggressive work, and some have taken a less aggressive effort. That's not necessarily been out of people's kindness. That's only been because they're looking at the potential problem that would take place if an aggressive attitude was taken. It's not our kindness. It's all about whether, if the government was to take a very firm stance against Muslims, what would be the reaction? How would the Muslims react? So we have little test cases like we're seeing in Birmingham, like we will see elsewhere, just to see how far the Muslim community can be pushed. How far will they go? How will they react? So our identity is very, very important. Unfortunately, what we're seeing as time is going on, and because we're under this pressure, because a few of our young hotheads possibly have been involved in things which they shouldn't have. We've seen it in London a few times, driving cars onto roads, attacking people at theatres and concerts. This has nothing to do with Islam, and I've spoke about this in many other places, so I'm not going to repeat myself here. There's nothing to do with Islam. Because these individuals have done that, this has now put all that pressure onto Muslims. So Muslims have been trying very hard to say, look, we're kind of all right. It's Hug a Muslim Day or something. We're all good. We don't want to hurt you. We don't want to eat you. We're not barbarians. We're humans. It's strange that we have to say that. But, we're going out of our way to say that. But what we're doing is like the pendulum, we're swinging too much in another direction now. So we're more than happy to give everything up. So when we have, open days in masjids, then we lose the respect of the masjid. We hear a little bit of noise at the back and we're sort of thinking we should be quietening these brothers down because it's the masjid. It's a place of Allah, and the place of Allah should be respected. But then likewise, when we have open days, then we have non-Muslims behaving in the same way, but we won't speak about the respect because to not cause any offense. So there's no harm in saying, look, this is who we are. Like you expect us to tolerate you and respect you, then hold on, this is who I am. So tolerate and respect this. As I said, we have had unfortunate cases where as Muslims we've not shown the true Islam that we should have shown. I'm involved in numerous charities, and I just received a request yesterday, the day before, by email, in a northern city in which there are numerous women, sisters, Muslim. Honestly, I can't count the number. It's really sad. And they are in concealed addresses. Why? Sexually abused by their own family members. Muslims. Okay? So let's not put our head in the sand. Sexually abused by their own, right? And it enrages you when you hear that. And it literally, even now I'm kind of getting a bit choked up, brings a tear to your eye. A girl, her own family is supposed to be her protection, Allahu Akbar. Her father, her uncle is supposed to be a protection. How can a father or an uncle or someone, take that honor from a woman? Allahu Akbar. And there's so many of these sisters. Some brought as slaves from Pakistan, India, slaves. Allahu Akbar. Treated like slaves. Some have been doused with petrol in order to try to kill them, and they've survived that. And they've got young children. And they're living now in hidden. The sister was so scared. She did not even want to give me their age and the number of children they had. I said, sister, for crying out loud, this is zakat money. I can't just say to you, here's $5,000, go spend it, when you say, I've got some sisters I'm looking after. There's got to be some level of transparency. There's got to be some level of accountability. So you're going to have to give me a little bit more than that. She goes, Mufsab, they're frightened. I said, look, I will not share this with anybody else. Forget privacy policy. As a Muslim, I will not share this with anyone else. Eventually, under that kind of level of pressure, she gave me their ages and the number of children they had. I have a long list. Okay, so now we're going to sit with Qari Sahib and a few of the Sathis later on, because WIFAQ have got a British Zakat board, and its purpose is to help sisters of that nature. So we have problems in our community, so let's not shy away from this, okay? We have problems within our community. And where, as men, always, sat back and think, Alhamdulillah, I've got all the authority here. I'm the Amir of my house. My wife has to obey me. My children have to obey me. But with these rights that we have comes great responsibility. And we only have to look at the Prophet ﷺ's life to see, was he a tyrant? In any aspect of his life, he was given a lot of authority over men, over women, over children, over non-Muslims in Medina. He had authority, and he literally was a king of Arabia. Was he a tyrant? What was he like to the people under his authority? He was their khadim. He was their khadim. He served them. He would sit in a circle. This is why I don't necessarily like sitting on a chair. But he would sit in a circle where when people would come, they would say, who is Rasulullah? And here, you'll always see who the Buzurg is or who the Sheikh is, whatever. When they would sit amongst the Sahaba, they did not know who the Prophet was. Because that was his nature. He did not set himself out. And now you see in business schools, they teach this servant leader as the best model of management. Back in the 80s, they used to say that, being an alpha male is the best way, because you really get people to get the job done. They've now kind of gone back on that and now saying that the servant leader is the greatest business model to encourage people to work and do things, because the guy kind of mucks it in with them. He's in there on the shop floor. He's in there on the grassroots. And that's how the Prophet ﷺ was. But unfortunately, we want all those rights. Oh, I can marry a second wife, I can do this, I can divorce you, I can do that, I can do this. I'll put on a bit of a Braddy accent for you. Yeah, so some of you can say that, I am from Bradford. Do you know what I mean, bro? I can do this, I'm a man and that, innit? The brother said, I can't do that. What you're talking about? Right? So, we sometimes think, because we've got all this, flexibility, Allah has given us so many rights to the man. And it gets to our head a little bit. The power gets to our head, we go on a little power trip. And sadly we see the halat, as I mentioned to you about those systems. Now this is just one small northern city, it's a small one. And this is only one charity. Allah knows best what's going on in London, I tell you straight, or anywhere else in this country. I'm talking about Muslim sisters. So what are we doing about it? So it's, we can't just, if we're trying to show this model of Muslims being this fantastic model that everybody should live up to, because that's what we claim, don't we? Muslims have this model that everybody should live up to. We're honest, we're fair, we're just, we're this, whatever. That's the only reason why there was mass conversion to Islam that happened, is because everybody looked at them and they thought, wow, what a person. I know there's a show that's on nowadays, Ertugrul, which I'm sure many people watch. And the many people who were drawn to him, clearly not by the looks on your faces, the people that were drawn to him because of his honor, his chivalry, his respect, the qualities that he possessed. So similarly, we find that the Muslim model is those qualities that we possess, where even a non-Muslim would admire in a person. But we've lost them. We still want all those rights, but we want to shun all those responsibilities. We don't want those responsibilities. Not my headache. Why should I have to deal with that? Well, you can't have it. You can't have one or the other. We find, for example, within an organization, that this chap at the top, the CEO, has more rights than everybody else. The football manager, he has more rights than everybody else. He can drop somebody. He can bring somebody in. He can buy somebody. A player can't do that. So he has more rights. But hey, the responsibilities on the manager's head are more than anyone else. Team's not working, he gets sacked. Team carries on. The CEO's got all the headache that he has to deal with. He has to deal with people's performance and deal with that, whatever. So it's all right having these rights, but it's the responsibilities that we forget. So the identity of a Muslim is absolutely essential. What he eats, how he dresses, how he talks, how he engages with his spouse, or with her husband, or with his children. This is his identity, and he's got to ensure that that identity then is passed on to the future generations. Otherwise, slowly, chip by chip, bit by bit, many of the massages that we have will, if they do continue to exist, won't have the sort of practices that we see now. It will be a whole different system, because many of the trustees that we have, or the committees, or whatever you call them, are immigrants who've arrived here. So to them, they still have that kind of cultural mindset. 2-3 generations of Muslims living here, what would we look like? What would we eat? Would we suddenly say, just recite Bismillah, it's okay, man? No, that's all right. I read in a hadith somewhere. That's it. Let's go with that. It's just unnecessarily. And I've been told now that, there's so much harm to science has now taught us that the animals go through great pain. The Prophet didn't know that. Now that we know this, surely we should change the way we slaughter.